Hello and welcome to the Racial Equity webinar series. I'm Kinkini Banerjee, the Coalition Relations Director at USPC, and I'm so glad to have you join us for this session. The USPC hosts the Racial Equity webinar series with funding support from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. And the purpose of this series is to increase our collective understanding about social and racial justice, equity, and inclusion, and improve our ability to identify and address root causes of inequity and work on systems level changes to advance health equity. These webinars are designed for participants at varying levels of knowledge, awareness, and readiness to apply concepts and principles of equity to maternal and child health work. We hope that these sessions bring ideas and inspiration for collaborating and co-designing programs, policies, and practices for you. I hope you're a member of our racial equity learning community. If you're not, this learning community is a forum to discuss issues related to structural, institutional racism within the reproductive health and justice field and share resources and ideas and learn from each other. If you're not part of this community, please consider joining today. And this interactive community has a webinar on each odd numbered month, including related materials and discussion of community insights. We also have a forum, so the conversation continues beyond the webinar and into our virtual listserv as well. We also have the Racial Equity Learning Community has a really rich file library with selected readings as well as readings related to each theme. We sometimes do blog posts or highlight work happening in the field and also call to action. So the link to this is www.usbreastfeeding.org/equity-community. And you can also navigate it if it's hard to remember this website. Go to our homepage, which is www.usbreastfeeding.org, and across the top you'll see the many tabs. Click on the News and Info tab, and in the drop-down menu you'll see the learning communities, and you'll be able to click and explore all of the learning communities. And definitely the racial equity is the one that will have the info for this series and the sessions and materials. So the slides are already posted on the learning community and on the public web page that's linked here. The recording will be posted later today. And if there are any other related readings and materials, we'll also be adding them to the page. Because we have a large number of registrants, during the session, attendees are in listen-only mode, but we want this to be as interactive as possible, given the framework of this webinar. So please submit questions at any time. Comments are welcome, and type them as they come up for you. If you haven't ever typed a question before, check the control panel on the right of your screen. If you don't see it, it might be minimized. Click on that orange tab with the white arrow, and if you click on it, the control panel will pop back out. Scroll down, and just under the audio section is the question tab. If you click on the question tab, it opens up a text box for you to type in. During today's session, if you have audio or any other technical questions, chat it for us in the questions box, or if you can't have access to the questions box here, send an email to office@usbreastfeeding.org, and one of our staff should be able to assist you. And that brings me to today's topic, advocating for families when healthcare failures show up in court. It's no secret that our health, education, criminal justice, and social service systems are failing the people they are intended to serve. The U.S. maternal morbidity and mortality rates and the infant mortality rates are higher than most developing countries, and the gap is widening. If that's not bad enough, the survival rates for African American mothers and their infants are even more dismal. African American women across the income spectrum from all walks of life are dying from preventable pregnancy-related complications at 3 to 4 times the rate, while the death rate for Black infants is twice that of infants born to non-Hispanic and white mothers. The US incarcerates people at an alarming rate. Intergenerational poverty and complex social challenges persist due to structural and systemic racism. And these patterns can lead to mistaken beliefs that social problems are inherent in individuals rather than created and sustained largely by environmental conditions. Today, we'll hear about how parents who receive less than adequate breastfeeding support in the hospital or in the community not only face the structural barriers from the healthcare system, but are penalized by the legal system for having limited resources. Infants are often removed from their homes, and parents are being charged with crimes. We'll hear how breastfeeding advocates can help by providing social and legal institutions with basic breastfeeding education and information about biological norms. Connecting coalitions and advocacy organizations like the Tennessee Breastfeeding Coalition and Birthright Consultants to legal and human services organizations can help change the fate of countless families. We'll hear how working with students at the university level through social work, law, education, nursing, and medicine could also alter the future of breastfeeding policies in local communities, in states, and across the country. Today's presentation will also discuss how and when to approach and impact policies to prevent medical kidnapping or separation of children from their families, unnecessary arrests based upon actual cases of advocacy and support. So we'll hear case studies today. I'm delighted to introduce our presenter, Jada Wright-Nichols. Jada is a maternal wellness consultant and the owner of Blossom Health and Maternal Wellness. She has been involved in community-based breastfeeding support since 2014 as a breastfeeding mother, as a community transformer with the Reaching Our Sisters Everywhere initiative, and a Breastfeeding USA counselor, the first in the state of Tennessee. Jada is the co-founder of B-Stars, Breastfeeding Sisters that are receiving support, a support circle for mothers of color in Memphis, Tennessee. B-Stars works to increase some of the to increase the rates of breastfeeding in some of the in areas with the lowest rates in the country. Through regular support group meetings, community baby showers, seminars, fundraisers, and consistent collaboration with local and state coalitions, B-Stars has been able to increase awareness, community support, workplace education, and confidence in the breastfeeding success. So if you missed this, Jada did a phenomenal presentation, a webinar on the B-Star. So we are going to put the link for that webinar recording in the chat box. It's something that I think every breastfeeding advocate or practitioner should see. Jada is also the Vice President of Breastfeeding USA and a steering committee member for the Tennessee Breastfeeding Coalition. She's a member of the Sankofa Breastfeeding Coalition. Helps families to navigate social, workplace, and legal discrimination through consulting, education, and also serving as an expert witness in cases of malnutrition and neglect related to breastfeeding. Jada is now a lactation consultant at the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, where she supports parents and infants in the neonatal, cardiac, and general pediatric units. Jada wears multiple hats. She's also an occupational therapist. She enjoys teaching and speaking about all things maternal and child health. Jada lives in Atlanta with her 6-year-old daughter who occasionally breastfeeds her own dolls. Go mama. Jada is an amazing leader and change agent and an inspiration to so many in the field, and the USBC is honored to recognize Jada as a Cultural Changemaker awardee at the upcoming June National Breastfeeding Conference and convening. So with that, welcome Jada, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kenny. I have no idea who that person is. um, I, I am honored to be here, humbled to be here. I'm showing my screen and always just sending up hopes and prayers that it's working. So, yes, all of that. um, I really, there are so many aspects of maternal and child health and wellness that I love discussing and really diving into. And this is an area that even 5 or 6 years ago, I had no idea that I would be involved in. Oh, I promise these slides were advancing. There we go. So I started out in the wellness industry, almost 20 years ago, and began to specialize in maternal wellness about 15 years ago, pretty early in my career. I graduated from college at the age of 7, if you're doing the math. Um, and I really just wanted to help new mothers feel good uh, while they were pregnant and after they have their children. So I offered. I'm a massage therapist as well, so I offered massage therapy. I offered some yoga instruction. I cheered them on with breastfeeding, although I knew nothing about breastfeeding myself as a mother or as a professional. I I involved and engaged their partners, their families, their other children. I did all of these things to really help to make mothers have a fulfilling, uh, beautiful, memorable experience. And I owned a business at the time that was called One Touch Wellness, and it was uh, for uh, for prenatal and postnatal health. And the tagline was turning luxury into a lifestyle, because as luxurious as I thought all of this was, I felt like moms really deserve to have it more frequently and not just be the baby shower gift or the special occasion. So really wanting to bring all of those services to moms so that they could enjoy pregnancy and thus the rest of life, right? So it's just that easy. And then I really started delving into maternal health and saw that nothing, almost nothing, was quite that rosy. Um, all mothers, even in America, even in the same part of town, in the suburbs, were not birthing their children the same way. They were not navigating pregnancies the same way. They were not breastfeeding their children in the same way or at the same rates. They did not have the same ability to stay home from work with their children, or the same benefits to, or the flexibility to return to work with a schedule that would allow them to um, breastfeed or parent or rest or advance in their career at the same time. So there was just a myriad of discrepancies in the birth world, in the breastfeeding world. I became a doula, and found that the mothers who could most afford my services were not the same as the mothers who most needed my services. And I mean, in terms of real advocacy and uh, real motivation, real support. There were moms who could not afford my services, and I was the only person at the hospital with them. So I became quite disenchanted with maternal health, and started to really, if if we can imagine, started to really dance away from it and focus on other things for a moment. And then I myself became a mother and jumped right back into it. I became a breastfeeding mother. I had quite a tumultuous pregnancy. I was fine, but I was also vomiting every day, so that is not fine. I should say baby was fine. So I had hyperemesis. I really, really needed breastfeeding to work for the sanity and the sanctity of my motherhood experience. And breastfeeding by grace went very well. I began to help other moms to breastfeed. They were actually reaching out to me to help them to breastfeed. I knew nothing. I was not a community transformer or a breastfeeding counselor, or I was just a breastfeeding mom who knew that breastfeeding was good. And so I just, meandered more and more deeply into the work of breastfeeding, and discovered that it too was not as cute as this little girl is. There are lots of ugly, ugly, ugly secrets and ways of life and ways of being and ways of entering the field and ways of advancing in the field and ways of supporting mothers and families that were very unlike anything I could have imagined, coming from birthing a child, nourishing a child, the types of discrimination and really all facets of maternal care, infant care, access, education, the systemic, the institutionalized racism. It was just everywhere, the discrimination just everywhere. And I'm starting with that part of it now, because as I give talks in many places, and those of us who speak regularly about equity work have seen an evaluation or have heard a question after we break down all of these barriers on our beautiful PowerPoints, a question that says, that's really sad, but what does this have to do with breastfeeding? So I'm saying it now at the beginning. It's all about breastfeeding. All of those very ugly truths are at the foundation of why certain women, women with low resources, women with only able to achieve a lower level on the totem pole. It is the reason that those women and more cannot move beyond the very troubling numbers, cannot close the gap in these disparities that we know about and convene about several times a year. So it really is all about breastfeeding. This is a foundation of public health. So I'm going to continue with a case study. And I want, if you're able, I would like for you to, as I'm going through the case study, just think about where are red flags. It doesn't have to be anything deep. It can be one key word. It can be whatever I'm saying about this case study that you'd like to know more about, or made you cringe or question everything you knew about breastfeeding and all of life. So, and then we'll read through those on the next slide. So there was a 35-year-old African-American mother of twins. These twins were new. They were born at 32 weeks by an emergency C-section. One twin weighed 4.2 pounds. The other twin weighed 4.5 pounds. This mom had two older children at home. One was 2 years old, one was 4 years old. Mom had breastfed those two children exclusively and had never pumped her breast milk. These infants were cared for in the neonatal intensive care unit at a local hospital, and they did some breastfeeding and they did some bottle feeding with mom's pumped milk, mom's express milk. They were discharged at 36 weeks gestation, so they spent about 4 weeks in the NICU, and they had both achieved at least their birth weight, and they were sent home mostly breastfeeding. Mom was asked to return to the NICU, return to or visit her pediatrician in 8 days. And when she did that, she discovered that the babies had not gained any weight. They had not lost weight. They had already achieved their birth weight, but they also had not gained any weight in these 8 days. Mother reported that she was feeding the babies regularly, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 times a day. From mostly her breast, she indicated that she did not like to pump, but she had plenty of milk to pump. That was the way that she could get relief. She was also feeding the babies that milk from the bottle. The babies were having wet and dirty diapers throughout the day and night. The nurse practitioner suggested that the mom supplement with formula. The babies were not jaundiced. But the nurse practitioner asked that she supplement. The mom said, I have plenty of milk. I'll just give them more of the pumped milk, and that should help them to gain weight. The nurse practitioner again suggested more firmly that she feed the babies formula. The mother's mother also suggested that she feed the babies formula, and the mother went home and continued to feed her babies from her breast with her breast milk, and would supplement with her own breast milk. The nurse practitioner said that she would like to see the babies in 2 weeks, and this was in an effort to save the mother money, both in transportation and payment at the office. So in 2 weeks, she would see these babies again. And on day 13, so the day before the appointment, Child Protective Services and the local police came and took the babies away from the mother, took the babies to a different hospital, where they received IV fluids and, of course, all the formula that they could handle. The mother's 2 older children were also removed from her care. The mother was not allowed to provide her pumped milk for the babies who were now at the hospital, and a few days later was arrested for 2 counts of felonious malnutrition and neglect. Exhale. Kenny, did anybody write anything in the chat box? Red
Yeah.
flags?
I'm just, horrible. This is terrible. Someone says, preemie, post NICU weight gain struggles. So typical, just needs more breastfeeding support and time. This would never happen to a white family, jaw dropping, says Rebecca.
Okay. Yep. All of that. So, this is what I knew. This is what I did not know this mother as these things were happening. It's not a mother that I had the opportunity to support. I came along and got to know her later on down the line. So all of those red flags are exactly right. Oh, I did not
There are
mention.
some more.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I'm listening.
Do you want to, based only on one weight, also, was the scale accurate? And then Christina says, I found that I wrote as a red flag almost everything Jada said. And then how did they justify malnutrition if the baby was not losing weight, had, diapers and yes, so everything. Yes, lots of comments along those lines.
Yeah, so one thing that I did not say is that one of the babies, the nurse practitioner said had a tongue tie. At least one of them had a tongue tie, but offered no additional support, follow up strategies, referrals. So we're we're looking at a mess, essentially, right? Just a real setup for failure. So one of the first things that uh, mothers who intend to breastfeed or mothers who are pregnant need is prenatal support and education. We know that this happens at the obstetrician most easily. They're seeing expectant moms all the time. So we can all continue to say, a lot of this is going to be preaching to the choir, I get that, but we can continue to just ask and spurn on the OBs to have these conversations early and often with expectant mothers. I have a there's a mother in the NICU at my hospital right now. So I work at a children's hospital, so it's all babies. Mothers are not our patients. So the mother came over from our general hospital and was really one of the most enthusiastic mothers about bringing the baby to the breast that I've seen in a while at this NICU. And so I said, mom is 18. I said, how did you decide that you were going to breastfeed? And she said, well, it's all they kept talking about. Every time, I'm going to shout out Grady Hospital, every time I went to Grady, they would just tell me breastfeed, 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 breastfeed. So that's what I'm trying to do. And I said, yes, go Brady. This is what we are all trying to do. This is where we love for mothers to receive the support that they need. But a lot of OBs are just where they are, and we can talk to them until we're blue in the face, and they'll, yeah, we know. So the next level is the medical students. We have got to get into these medical schools, these classrooms, even the undergraduate students in biology classes, and do some guest lecturing, or on a larger scale have a lactation rotation or something in between to help normalize or reinforce what medical students are hearing, receiving, knowing. I talk to residents and interns daily, and I have no need to try to one up anybody, but I find myself almost daily dropping a little pearl that we all think is quite basic, and they're just, oh, I didn't know that. I had no idea. Oh, we're supposed to do that. So they don't know. We can go in, need to be going in and educating them when right, their brains are most malleable, and give them the information that they need, that they really want to have. They want to be able to support breastfeeding families. They just really don't know how. And sometimes they're not willing to or wanting to ask for lactation support. Sometimes they don't know what to even ask for. And other times it is just easier to grab a 6-pack of formula and move on through the weekend. Including families is in prenatal breastfeeding education is so essential, including partners, including mothers and mothers-in-law, in what this looks like and what it means for your family structure, your family dynamic, family responsibilities, the expectations around breastfeeding, the biological norms around breastfeeding, so that even as we educate the moms, even as the OBs do, there's not this person in her ear saying, you can't do this, this isn't right, give that baby some formula, I want to feed the baby because it's my baby too. Like all of these things, parents, mothers-in-law, aunties, everybody needs to hear, so that we are singing the same song in harmony. And that will bolster a lot of this support. The person, I'm going to give snippets of the rest of this case as we go on. The reason that CPS was called is because the grandmother of the twins called CPS, knowing that the babies were going to go back to the doctor the next day. How many think that 2 weeks was way too long between visits for twins who weren't growing well? So, but the grandmother knew that the babies were going back, and she called CPS. She did not think or expect CPS or the police department to arrest her daughter. So she does have regret around that, but she did make the call. The nurse practitioner did not make the call. And then signal boosting support groups and resources that are in your area. So when we leave here and move into the online learning for the equity space, I would love for all of us to share the resources that are closest to us, or if they're online, just resources that we love, because we may not be the ones to provide the actual support. But if we amplify the messages of the groups that are already doing the work, that are local to the moms, or that moms have an affinity for, families do, then it can mean so much more than the support that we would love to provide, but don't necessarily have the capacity or the expertise. So really emphasizing all of the support. Trust me, there are enough breastfeeding parents who are struggling for all of us to get our loving hands on. So try those areas for prenatal support. And then, of course, there's lactation support in the hospital. Pediatricians, neonatologists, hospital-based lactation consultants, nurses and nurse practitioners, physician assistants, all want the best for baby. They are not all going about providing stellar lactation support the same way. And I'm including hospital-based lactation consultants. And I'm saying that as a hospital-based lactation consultant. There are so many missed opportunities when a nurse or a lactation consultant thinks, well, that mom is not going to breastfeed, so I didn't bother setting her up with a pump, without really having a conversation or a compelling conversation with the mom. She doesn't know. She didn't expect her baby to be in the NICU, or had never really heard about breastfeeding, or didn't occur to her that this was even a thing to do. So the lactation support in the hospital that is again amplified and reinforced by every single person who is what will help start the mother off rather on a road to lactation success. This mom in our case study had babies in the NICU for 4 weeks and did not see a lactation consultant. She says that she never saw a lactation consultant. Apparently, the lactation consultant did come to see her, but did not document that she had come to see her, which either way is not right. But the mother, I can see that an experienced breastfeeding mother who had done it without a blip 2 times before, had plenty of milk. I can see where an overworked hospital-based lactation consultant would just kind of move past her room, babies are doing well, and not give her any specific support to perhaps look at the way that the babies are suckling, to identify maybe poor transfer because of 1 or 2 tongue ties. So I can see that happening more than I could see a lactation consultant coming and providing tons of support, but forgetting to document it. But that is my advantage. Nurses and nurse practitioners who, and some, depending on where you go, they kind of run the show. Nurse practitioners, especially physician assistants, especially, they kind of run the show and can get babies breastfeeding much earlier than they are. And I have my NICU lens on now, but this could be anywhere. But getting babies to the breast before making sure that they can take 60 ounces from a bottle. Like, we know that we don't have to wait that long. So what can we do? Pre and post feeding weight checks. There are so many non-nutritive sucking as soon as possible. So many ways to help support the parent and the baby who want to breastfeed while they're in the hospital. Lactation and early intervention. So as an occupational therapist, this is the area where I started, not in lactation, but in early intervention. And early intervention is a program that's supported in every state, but it's housed in different areas of the government, depending on which state you go to. It's called every state has its own unique name. It provides services for infants and children aged birth to 2, or in some places birth to 3. And they have their hands between the occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech therapists, nurses, dietitians, educators. They have their hands on these families in the homes almost from day one, as soon as they qualify and can get off of the much too long waiting list. They have their hands on these families. If lactation were a part of that, or even if those people knew more about lactation and again the biological norms around lactation, a lot of these concerns could be addressed earlier, before we say, well, just give the baby a bottle, just give the baby a bottle of formula. So those people who are involved in early intervention services, or lactation consultants, peer counselors in some cases, could actually become involved in early intervention service provision. So they are there with these special, fragile, in need of extra care babies, and that is a great way to support the families. So lactation in the clinics. So once they're discharged, the pediatrician, what does the pediatrician know? Do you say, I'm breastfeeding 12 times a day because I'm looking at my fancy app, and then the pediatrician is automatically saying, oh, that's too many times. You shouldn't be breastfeeding more than 10 times a day. The baby must not be getting enough to eat. Here's some formula, right? So what do they know? What is normal to them? What is acceptable to them, and under what circumstances, at what point are they going to call for extra help? Do they know who to call? Do they know that there's a support group closer to the clinic than there is the hospital where the baby came from? Or do they know that there's a hotline for the state that the physician could call, the nurse practitioner could call, the mom could call, the grandma could call these services? Do they even know that exists if there's a question? We could be offering support days where we just field questions, or support groups in the offices in these clinics. We could leave resource guides. We could provide business cards or other ways to contact us. Be very proactive about showing all of the spaces and places where there is support, so that families, babies are not falling through these cracks unnecessarily. I do believe that this nurse practitioner who saw this mother just didn't know enough about breastfeeding, or how to support a breastfeeding mom. And though they were known to one another, this mother had not had issues with breastfeeding before, and so the physician, nurse practitioner could just cheer her along. Her kids were going well, and that was fine. But when there was a problem, I just truly believe the nurse practitioner did not know what to do, and then began to later on backtrack and cover herself. All right, and then there's lactation in the community, lactation support in the community. So nobody inspires moms of color more than Beyonce. Just kidding. I just started becoming a Beyonce fan. I can't help it. I think it's the motherhood. But look at those Twinkies over there, and this picture of her formation ladies. I just love. I think they must have taken it off the internet, but thank goodness I have it on my Instagram page where the mom, after performing at the Super Bowl, is nursing her, looks like a pretty big kiddo, and you know, just moving right along. But I cannot find this picture anywhere else, so I hope they did not remove it for that reason. It's cut off after the lady who's looking at us. But lactation support in the community, and again, we're gonna talk about in the online learning area all of the wonderful lactation support groups for moms of color and other specialty areas. I know a few of those. So at the same time that I was learning about this mom of twins, I'm helping moms every day, twice a day, 5 times a day, with babies who are diagnosed with failure to thrive. These babies had gone home. They were, mom was nursing well in the hospital for the, 36 hours that she was there, and the baby comes back. Poo is still black or dark green. Baby is lethargic or, has hyperbilly, like all of the things that we just know what to do. And I say we know what to do, but sometimes even those situations aren't handled super well. But the babies are in the hospital. Mom and dad are getting tons of support, great counseling, lots of encouragement. Thank you so much for bringing your baby in. This is exactly what it needs. Yes, please put the baby skin to skin. Hold the baby under these lights. This light pad can come to your chest. We're going to weigh the baby after every feed. We're going to put the baby on fluids for just a few hours, just long enough. We're doing all of these things, right, for certain babies. Failure to thrive, right? And then if babies look a different way with the same exact symptoms, we're calling it malnutrition and neglect. Now, who gets to call it that? Because the poo is the same, the level of lethargy is the same, the intake, output are the same. Why are these different labels on it? And we know why. But this, of course, is not to say that Black babies never get to come into the hospital for hyperbilly, or white babies are never called malnourished, or parents accused of being neglect. But there is an overwhelming sway in one direction or the other, where the only reasonable reason, obvious reason, is race and or resources, access. So medical kidnapping, what is it? It's where the an organization, so the local government, local police officers, usually with the help of Child Protective Services or Health and Human Services, removes children from the home and takes them into state custody, because the way that the parents are caring for the children is not an approved way. Oftentimes the parents are not intentionally defiant, but they have voiced their defiance. It's not anything that they are trying to hide. And it in many situations there is something that has gone undiagnosed, underdiagnosed, undertreated, mistreated. There is something going on with the parent or something going on with the baby that's just not quite right. This is different from removing a child who's definitely in danger, although Child Protective Services or the police views them as the exact same. So the call. I receive a call. I get all of the information that I gave to you. I get it downloaded to me on the phone from a friend who works in the community where this mother lives. And she just asks my advice. And of course, I'm trying to help the mother breastfeed her children because that's the only reason that I got into breastfeeding support. I just wanted to help moms breastfeed. But it was, I found out too late. The babies are now 2 years old. Mom has not had those babies or her two older children for 2 years. She served jail time. She was released. She had been released recently, but she had served a good bit of jail time. Why? Because she had no resources and no reason really to get out of jail. The grandmother who started all of this also did not have custody of any of the children. I do not know why that wasn't an option. Her being the loving and considerate soul that she appeared to be. But the babies and the two older kids were in state care, I think split among 3 different houses. So I think the twins were together, and 2-year-old baby and 4-year-old baby, who are now 4 and 6, were in 2 different places. So I'm giving all of this information. I'm jotting down and sharing all of the same red flags and more that you all did. And I was asked to speak to an attorney who's working on the case pro bono. I speak to the attorney. It's a very nice white woman who is deeply concerned about this case because she knows that when her baby had a tongue tie, she was able to fly to Chicago to have the tongue tie repaired by the best tongue tie repairer in all of the land. And it made a difference in her breastfeeding relationship and her breastfeeding journey. And she was very easily able to see that this mother in question did not have that access. Nobody mentioned to her that the tongue tie was even anything that needed to be repaired or could be repaired, or what does it look like? What does it mean? What does that have to do with my baby's gaining weight? She knew none of that. This woman was asked to join the case pro bono by a public defender who knew absolutely nothing about birth, breastfeeding. He knew nothing. He admitted that he knew nothing. He was completely out of his league, over his head, so ripe, so open for the information. And he put the right people in place. They asked me to come to court and serve as an expert witness, and I did, of course. And I've testified in cases before around custody. Does mom really need to be with the baby as much as she's saying that she needs to be with the baby because it's dad's visitation night or weekend or whatever? So I've testified for those reasons. And but this, with this mother on trial for 2 felonious counts, I was super nervous. So, of course, whenever any of us in the world of lactation has a question about the law, we knock on the door or the chat box of Liz Brooks. I gave her a little bit of a rundown, and she said, "This is awful, blah, blah, blah. All you need to do is tell the lactation truth." And That is what I did. That's what all of us, that's what any of us need to do. We only need to tell the lactation truth, whether we are talking to the physician, the nurses, the nurse practitioner, the physician assistant, the mother, the father, the grandmother, anybody, the educator, the police officer, the judge. We just need to tell the lactation truth. I walked into the courtroom. I had met all of the attorneys just briefly before and did not have privy to the medical record before the trial, which was good. It actually played well in Mom's favor. I could not be biased any more than I am at all. So when I was, I guess, cross-examined by the state's attorney, this man knew nothing about breastfeeding. Nobody knew anything about breastfeeding. I'm the last witness, though, so they had heard about how this mom was so defiant and she was too lazy to come to appointments and she didn't care about her children and all of these things. She forgot that the lactation consultant came in to see her, but the lactation consultant really did come to see her, even though we couldn't find the lactation notes in the chart. She just all of these things the jury had heard. It was a jury trial. The jury had heard, the judge had heard. I get in there and I start talking about biological norms. I'm talking about what I might have done had I heard these same concerns from or had seen the same concerns in a mom who's breastfeeding twins. Judge was flabbergasted. Cross-examining attorney was flabbergasted to the extent that he forgot that we were not on the same. He wanted to ask me more and more questions about breastfeeding for his own edification. And the judge stopped at one point and said, wait a minute, so you mean to tell me that? And whatever I had just said, I reiterated. He was fascinated. The jury was fascinated. The judge ended up asking the state attorney to just sit down. And it was also time for lunch. But the mother was over to the I had not met the mother yet. She was over to the side in tears. The female attorney who had reached out to me was in tears. The public defender was blushing. And this is the lactation truth. It's what we all know, what we say every day. It's just getting into the spaces of the people who don't know that this part of the truth, this part of the story exists. So that is when I decided we need to do more of this, and we all need to do more of this. This woman, the judge asked me at the end, why do you think this mother was treated this way? This was an African-American judge, an African-American state attorney, and a white male public defender. The judge asked, well, explain to me then what happened. Why do you think that this mother ended up in court today? Mom is right across the court. I said, because she's poor, she's Black, she didn't have access to adequate lactation support. The mother ended up having misdemeanor charges, so reduced from felony significantly to misdemeanor charges. She does carry those charges, but she served no more time, and her attorney is now working on having that record expunged. She is working on getting her children back, but she was really without her children, her infants, for 2 years. This I just saw on another lactation consultant's page. deep in equity work. Court reporters may be writing down Black people's testimonies wrong. So even as we have the opportunity to come to court and defend ourselves, what we're saying may not be heard or well understood or believed. I'm adding on to what this component of the story is. But so this is, again, an area that we, didn't even realize was happening, or maybe we did. But here it is, just revealed, May 23rd, 2019. So there's so much work to do, right? So much work to do. Let's see. So here we can impact medicine and nursing, schools. We can talk to schools of social work. I've been to some classrooms for in schools of public health locally in Atlanta. They are also fascinated, and I think a couple of them are going to end up being lactation consultants. I didn't mean to do that. I wanted them to keep doing their own work, but supporting or better understanding lactation. Education, we know more lactation education needs to be in education, right? Law schools, law enforcement, so that moms are not getting tickets for breastfeeding while parked. They're not getting their babies taken away from them when they breastfeed in court in front of a judge who sits on a bench in a state where breastfeeding is legal, even anywhere that the mother is. Family law attorneys, and again, law schools where these future attorneys are, really talking to them. I last year had the opportunity to talk to 2 attorneys, and both of them, not about lactation, but when I told them what I did, both of them said, "Oh my goodness, I could have used you. I had a breastfeeding case, and this mom was trying to keep her kid away from the father." And another one said, "I really could have used you because I had a mother who wanted to provide as much breast milk as she could, and she was trying to explain to me that she needed to be around the baby more frequently so that she could do that well." And they had 2 different perspectives, but the lactation truth to each of those would have sorted that out really nicely. Child Protective Services, they just don't know, and we get it. They're doing their marching orders, but they do have some decision-making capability. A lot of times it is, even here at this hospital, it is just, well, we have to see if the defects worker says. Transportation Security Administration and the airlines, my goodness, who can believe that we're still talking about, huge billion-dollar airline companies throwing away breast milk or preventing a mom from breastfeeding, or any of the ridiculous stories that we're still hearing about. We can support efforts of lactation lounges and spaces, while also reminding moms and parents that they don't have to go to those spaces, but they're there if they want them, and they're really nice. I keep my head in every single one I see. Deep breath for Homeland Security. There's lots of work that we can be doing, could have been doing, should have been doing around these babies. We know that there are more babies separated from their breastfeeding moms than what has been revealed. And maybe the worst of this is behind us in terms of brand new kiddos, but there is just a lot of work that we could be doing as maternal child health, public health providers and servants. Hey, that's us. Checking in with breastfeeding coalitions and breastfeeding stakeholders. Now that USBC is growing and acknowledging so many more breastfeeding support groups and groups that have arms of breastfeeding, this is a really great opportunity to get to know where and who all of those people are, so that we can better collaborate. And we really, really need an all hands on deck approach to much of this work. The maternal and family advocacy works that are already doing such a great job can use us. They can still use our energy, our information, our expertise. So connecting with them, postpartum support providers, and these are the big ones, because a lot of times it is, you know, we're excited to highlight these smaller groups that are coming on and really, you know, changing the face, the landscape of lactation support, but moving back, reaching out to these larger organizations who have a much further reach, and reminding them of the ways that we can provide assistance. March of Dimes and moms who are suffering with postpartum mental health conditions can really, really use some lactation expertise. These are Bias in the Mirror is a book that I could not put down. It's exploring implicit bias in health professions education. It really undergirds a lot of this work. You know, a lot of health providers think that these are such altruistic professions that they, you know, they're doing the good work, they're serving the people, and they're forgetting about who they are leaving behind. And then implicit bias in the courts. Apparently, I did a search. I gave it a Google. What's out there about implicit bias in the courts? Tons of information. So it's out there. It's just not being, I don't know, read or listened to or believed, implemented. So much work to do. And of course, all of these anti-women's health movements that are very clearly being orchestrated at the same time, we can get behind. These are women's health issues, not you know, a single issue. This is an attack on women's health in total. So you know, figuring out where your voice, where your organization's voice and activity is best served is what will help move the needle along, or maybe back to where it was previously when more things made sense. So much more to say, but I'm leaving time for questions if there are any. I do live in Atlanta now, but this is my crew in Memphis, Tennessee, where my lactation work began. These are some moms who are part of Breastfeeding Sisters that are receiving support. We took over the Civil Rights Museum, which is the place where Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, and also had a beautiful photo shoot in all other places, but really needing to make a political statement about all things breastfeeding, support, inequity, and rights. So I am inspired to continue to do this work wherever I'm called and needed, whatever capacity. And I hope that there is some spark within you also to reach out to someone, some organization, or some person, some family that's been wronged, to help with this work also. Thank you.
Thank you, Jada. And, you know, among the so many takeaways, just tell the lactation truth. I think the single most important concept. And so many comments have come in even since you had said, and even as people were flagging Their concerns, many had suggestions as well, Jada. So we had, folks talking when you presented the case study, talking about like how good, how do, tongue-tie ignorance too common for preemie babies to be assumed to be incompetent due to short gestation instead of
Mm-hmm.
anatomical problems sometimes, was there just this, was there opportunity for visiting nurse and how might we be using home visiting programs
Mm-hmm.
or,
Mm-hmm.
health workers in that to assess 2-3 days after the visit and then
Mm-hmm.
how, leaving for a high risk well, for a discharge from after a stay in NICU to have 8 days go by again, all of those things that
And they, right, all of that. And they were at discharge, they were 36 weeks. They were still just, they were not even term babies at
right?
discharge. It was just horrible all the way around. Yes, go ahead.
Absolutely. And then it's about, the importance of really as Letitia said, importance of, engaging the family. So having family attendance at breastfeeding support groups, at WIC classes, at the hospital support groups as well. Linda says, please be sure to include midwives as resources. As
Yes.
we are very supportive of breastfeeding, both prenatally and postpartum.
I think this is not the first time I've left midwives out. I think I leave midwives and doulas out because I think they have it right. So I don't. So it's a weird compliment, but yes, I will be sure to list those as
As a doula
service
yourself. Mhm. Claire asks, what strategies can we employ to increase access to lactation support in the hospital so that all families get adequate support prior to discharge, especially for NICU families or others at risk of, not meeting their own breastfeeding goals? So, from your hospital vantage, Jada, what
providers.
are
Yes.
something?
So I think just helping to make uh, breastfeeding more of the norm, the goal, instead of, is this the thing that this mom wants to do? Oh, okay, she does 2 days before discharge. So let's get the lactation consultant in there and get that baby latched. So working as soon as the baby is able, put the baby to breast for non-nutritive sucking or maybe nutritive sucking. And if the baby gets a little more than what's in the bottle, that is okay in many, many cases. So just making it a part of the everyday. Right now, I think we're ending Kangaroo Care Week at the hospital. And so there's a big push to bring the baby skin to skin as frequently as possible. That same thing needs to happen all throughout the year with as many babies as possible, and just making breastfeeding uh, uh, the the goal, the norm. This is what we're going to do because this is what your baby can do on some level, or we'll see what your baby can do. But waiting and so that when it becomes a part of the everyday care by nurses, by physicians, by the whole team, then the lactation consultants can come in and provide support uh, for the families who are really struggling versus being spread so thin to where they're having to set up a pump for every single person who's at the hospital, um, so that everything that the family needs is already in place. Lactation support is just there for extra support.
Thank you. Absolutely. And then, just more comments coming in. And Karen says that, seeing very preterm twins who are now only late preterm or maybe early preterm at 8 days post discharge, 2 weeks later, it's those health providers who should be the ones arrested, not the
Yes,
mom. And so,
yes.
this family was destroyed And then India, us, and then you get a lot talking about, what a powerful experience testifying in court was. Rebecca Rowland says that. Gigi says, wow, I'm so proud of you to be able to bring truth to the courtroom.
Thank you,
And
lady.
then again, comments about, the many different choice points that we have to be engaging, educating,
Mm-hmm.
raising awareness. And it says, Ruth says this, the physiology of family separation as well. Incredible
Mm-hmm.
presentation, says
Thank you.
Rebecca here. And then everyone could be connected to, could use this lactation knowledge, no matter what area, what
Mm-hmm.
sector that one is working in. Seems very important to get the images of women breastfeeding. These great photos that Jada has are so powerful to combat the
Thank you.
stereotypes and racism and stigma there. That's Lynn Goodall. And then
Thank you.
Heather says, "Thank you, Jada, for standing up to standing up for women of color who want to breastfeed and the many biases and barriers. We need many more lactation specialists reaching out to medical professionals and helping our mom."
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Talk about more peer counselors in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
What type of training, more training for labor and delivery staff, and when breastfeeding conversations should be starting throughout the pregnancy. So, great,
Right.
very engaged um, participants today. Thank you for this. So many
Thank you.
comments.
Okay,
Um,
thank you, everyone.
um, there is, what do you think? Okay, all hospitals should receive training about breastfeeding. Blows my mind that there's such a lack of knowledge about the common baseline, and just I think folks are still kind of wrapping their heads around the courtroom scene, which was so
Yeah.
visually that, as you spoke about, just people being flabbergasted and then being
Mm-hmm.
able to do that. It just tells you what a big gap there are. So, Jada, can you talk a little bit about, how um, through the work of the birthright consultants, but also the work that BStars is doing to create that web and that net of support throughout, working with the state coalition, working with different
Mm-hmm.
stakeholders. You work with BStars, connects with many, many innovative partners. Could you speak a little
Right.
bit about
So absolutely. So I think that the work that I've done with BStars and that BStars has done is what really helped to bring this front of mind, right? Because although we are really just trying to provide breastfeeding support for moms, it is all advocacy work. It is all equity work because there are so many barriers. So these, this luxury that, we kind of started talking about at the beginning, married to this real necessity or right, is they are all definitely interlinked, interconnected, and I just, one cannot exist without the other. I never would have been compelled or called to do this kind of work had I not been simply providing support to breastfeeding moms who just want to breastfeed their kid in their home while their grandmother's telling them not to, or just want to breastfeed their kid while they're going back to school, or just want to breastfeed their kid while they take a work trip and try to come back through the airport with a gallon of breast milk. So, had I not seen all of those and experienced all of those as a breastfeeding support provider with BStars primarily, I would not have the capacity, or maybe not even the interest or the knowledge, the knowing that moms need to be supported, families need to be supported in other ways. So yeah, they're definitely very interconnected.
Thank you, Jada. And for those who are on participating today, we have, if you're a member, you can be joining some of our learning communities, but also there are, check out, there's this conference is going to talk about, system level changes, structural changes for women in the prison system, in incarceration, for students, at, various workplace sectors, for breastfeeding, the barriers that communities with cultural linguistic barriers face, and the issues of, all of the social determinants of health, of having homelessness, having, no housing shortage, and all of these things of how they impact breastfeeding, and how each of us, in what we do, if we are not looking upstream at some of the issues that are causes the barriers, we will never, as a country, be able to close the disparities and the gaps that we have. It's really looking at where those gaps are and being very intentional about those. Jada, we have a few more minutes. Anything else that you would like to add? The kudos just keep coming through,
Oh, thank you,
through the
everyone.
comments, and we'll be sure to share with you.
We can. I'm looking forward to chatting more about it in the learning community. But I just want to say to you, and Kenny, and Miriam, Camille, and all of USBC, thank you for this opportunity. But more than that, thank you for the work that you do all year long, every single day, in order to keep these, again, very uncomfortable truths really front of mind. You bring to light so many issues and areas that I think many of us would not consider their impact on breastfeeding support, or you remind us of all the ways that we can join together and combat these barriers. So I want to thank you all, and I am so looking forward to the conference. I don't even know if it's too late to register for the conference, but if you have not registered for the conference, do register for the conference if you're able. If not, definitely next year. It's so amazing and invigorating, and nobody asked me to say that.
You just did our promo piece for us. I'm going to invite Camille, but seriously, it's our membership, it's our member base, it's our network that is so inspiring. It's you all that are working at the grassroots that keep us going. We have one question that I cannot not ask you. It's from Susanna, who says, and Susanna, she says within quotes, I'm only a breastfeeding peer counselor. My goodness, like a breastfeeding peer counselor is precious, precious. There's no only about it, but Susanna, she says, and thinking about what I want to do next as part of my career, where my efforts can be most impactful. Your talk has inspired me so much. Suggestions in terms of, as a peer counselor, as I'm thinking about the
So
different
let me say this. There are studies abound about how peer counselors are the most impactful breastfeeding support providers, more impactful than lactation consultants, than various other types of support groups. Peer counselors specifically provide the most impactful support, and that is known, documented, surveyed. So please take that only out of your description henceforth and forevermore. And you can do whatever you want to do. Sky's the limit. If you you can do anything. Figure out what you are interested in, where you are most useful, and continue to do it with energy and with passion and with collaboration, within the community or beyond, and just keep going.
Thank you, Jada. I would second that. And Susanna, we would love to learn what you're doing in your part of the country. And please know that USBC is a space where there are spaces to come and network with your peers, to hear what's happening, to share the gifts that you have and the resources that you have, and learn from others. So we hope we'll be seeing more of you, Susanna, on our space as well. Leslie asked, do you have resources on incidences of medical kidnapping or CPS issues related to, childbirth, early parenting? If there are any, could we post it on the page with your slides?
Yes, I can look for some resources. Everything that a lot of what I've seen is quite sensationalized. So I did not want to share in the sensationalism, but the cases do exist. But I do need to look more deeply to see what is fair, because it's either a mom who didn't want to vaccinate her child and now everybody has the measles, or babies who have reached very poor endings, very sad endings. And these stories of this mom aren't really publicized, but
right.
They are happening every day and everywhere. So we just need to I don't know what public health channels we could find something like this.
Yeah,
more specifically, because they are not documented as medical kidnapping. They're, a child is removed for their well-being. So.
Right. And I know that there are coalitions that are working on some of these things. Our wonderful coalition relations coordinator, Miriam, who's fantastic, we'll try to see if there are other coalitions that are doing this work, that have been involved, and that they can share resources too. So
yes, thank you,
Marianella, we'll do that. So thank you again, Jada, for a really incredible, powerful webinar. This again will be promoted. We'll be promoting this widely. And now I'm going to call Camille, who is our events and public relation manager, to give a very quick update on the upcoming conference. Camille?
Thank you, Kinkini. Thank you so much, Jada. You already did our promo for me. You made my job, my life so much happier and easier. But yes, as Jada said, we have the conference coming up in a couple of weeks. It's the 14th and 15th. We also have events on the evening of the 13th. So please bear that in mind as well if you haven't registered yet. We are keeping online registration open until the 7th of June. Ideally, though, folks would register before that so that we can be really accurate with our head counts for meals and any kind of allergies or food considerations. I will let you know that if anyone's thinking about doing any marketing, we are closed as far as the program book. We've sent that off to the printer today. Happy dance. Yay, it's beautiful, and we hope you see it there. But we still do have a couple of exhibit spaces remaining. If anyone is interested in that, you can email me at conference@usbreastfeeding.org, or if you have any other conference related questions and you aren't quite sure where to go, feel free to pop me a note and I would put it in the chat. I think we're about to sign off though, but it's just conference@usbreastfeeding.org, and we really hope we'll see you there. So thank you.
Thank you, Camille, and our staff team can't wait to see you all at the conference. And if you are there, please stop by and say hello to Camille. She manages the logistics and so many things, and probably touches pretty much every single attendee that comes in some way or the other. So we will be looking forward to connecting with those of you who will be at Bethesda. And that brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you, Jada, for such a terrific session. Let's keep the conversation going on the Learning Community Discussion Forum. So if you have resources to share, we are very interested in learning about that from you. And if we find anything, we will also be sharing with on the community. So thanks, everybody. And until next time, do be sure to fill out the evaluation forms. We read all of them. We bring the topics that you suggest to us. So, and you also get a certificate of attendance if you complete the evaluation. So please do that, and let us know if you have speakers and topics that you would want to see in future webinars. Thanks again, everyone.